Dave Chapman wrote a letter to Jim Henson when he was about 11 years old. 8 or so years later, he was puppeteering on his first professional puppetry gig, Muppet's Treasure Island. Since then, he's puppeteered Otis the Aardvark for 5 years on the BBC, performed as the Emperor Skeksis in Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, and is one of the puppeteers that brings the iconic round droid BB-8 to life in the recent Star Wars films. He also assisted Frank Oz for Yoda's big return to the screen in The Last Jedi. I talk with Dave Chapman about his career and his thoughts on puppetry in this episode of Under the Puppet. You're listening to Saturday Morning Media. And now, back to our show. Welcome to the show that is preserving puppetry through the personal stories of professional puppeteers. My name is Grant Pachoco, and this is Under the Puppet. Dave Chapman, welcome to Under the Puppet.
Hi, Grant. It's good to be here.
I'm so excited to talk to you. I was going through your credits, and there's so many shows that you've worked on. We have so many shows to talk about. I hope you're ready for an 8-hour interview.
Yeah, I'm ready. You can chuck anything at me. I'll do my best.
Okay, great. Do you remember your first exposure to puppetry, like the first time you saw puppets?
The very first exposure to puppetry, I'm not sure. I mean, I remember clearly when I had that kind of moment of going, oh, wow, I want to do that for a living. But that came when I saw the Muppet Show. I guess my earliest exposure being from England would have been like a Punch and Judy show or, something like that. Or I grew up by the seaside, so I'm pretty sure I saw Punch and Judy shows in the UK traditionally are seen by the seaside. So I'm pretty sure I saw Mr. Punch, and I thought that was crazy. For any listeners who don't know what Mr. Punch is, it's like this insane hundreds of year old British tradition where a puppet comes on and smashes the hell out of everybody, and there's a policeman and a crocodile and his wife, and it's all bananas. But it's been going for hundreds of years, and it's a great tradition over here. So I saw that and I was intrigued. How are these little people talking and moving around? And then there's kind of a moment when I looked at puppets very seriously as a 5-year-old. I was very serious as a 5-year-old. I looked at puppets in Muppet Show in 1976. So I think it's 76, 77. And I just saw it and it leapt out the screen, the colors, the comedy, the characterizations, the voices, the music, everything about that show was a huge wallop in the face with a frying pan. I remember clearly that moment, and I was very young. But at that point, I just thought, wow, that looks like a cool job. And then spent the rest of, I suppose, the next 5-6 years telling my mum that I wanted to work on the Muppet Show, which seemed like an incredibly difficult thing to do, you know.
And were you aware that they were filming in London just right nearby?
No, that was the kind of second kicker, if you like. So I already was crazy about this show, and everything from the Muppet Show, if you watch it, even now, is very American, right? I mean, it seems to be set in the Muppet Show theater in America, and so I didn't make that connection till I was about 11 years old. And when I was 11 years old, I was reading about the making of the Star Wars movies and Indiana Jones movies, and it said they were filmed at Elstree Studios in just outside London, England, where the Muppet Show was filmed. And I was like, oh, what? The Muppet Show was filmed at this place in England? And so then I was drilling down, going to the library and trying to find out more about stuff pre-internet, and getting books and reference books and finding out where was this magical palace where they made Star Wars movies, Raiders movies, and the Muppet Show. This is incredible. So I did learn that. And then I kind of found out the Jim Henson Company were based in the UK at the time. Obviously, I know they had offices in New York and LA, but for me, again, reading Jim Henson Company was in Hampstead at the time, Hampstead in Northwest London. That was crazy. I thought, wow, this is all not on my doorstep. It was an hour and a half away. But to me, having presumed everything was in New York or LA, learning that it was an hour and a half away was just mind-blowing, you know.
And after you saw the Muppets and got an interest in puppetry, were you trying to build your own puppets, or were you buying puppets, or just trying to put your own stuff together?
Yeah, I was. I made puppets in primary school. So when I said I saw the Muppet Show when I was sort of 5, from sort of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, I was making very badly making, I have to say, puppets from foam sponge. So I'd go and take my pocket money to the local supermarket, and I would buy loads of sponges. I was like, here comes that weird kid again, buying all those sponges. He must be real clean. So I glued sponges together to make a block, you know, like you would buy foam. If you thought it through, you'd buy foam from a supplier, but I didn't know that. So I glued the sponges together and make a cube or whatever, and then I'd bash the foam and snip and make puppets like that. And I did puppet shows for my school, like assemblies, you know, and yeah, they were epic as well. They had loads of characters. I don't know how good they were. They had loads of characters, and my friend me and Dale were switching puppets and trying to make and doing all the voices. And so yeah, I was definitely trying to get into that zone. I mean, obviously I'm a kid, so I wasn't sort of, you know, badgering them. I did write to Jim Henson Company when I was 11 though, but up to that point I didn't really, because that's when I found out they were in London. I suddenly went, okay, I must write to them and see what I can find out, you know.
Yeah, well, let's talk about this letter, because I heard that this letter kind of led to other things, and they kept this letter on file.
Yeah, they did. It was very weird. Well, it was very lovely actually. I wrote to them when I was 11, and they wrote back saying, you're too young. I got a signed photo of Jim Henson, and I got a letter from the company saying, you are too young to join the company right now, obviously. So we'll keep your details on file, and we'll give you a call should we ever need to train any Muppet performers or puppeteers, you know, background Muppet performers. And then I was like, oh, that's a shame, but I have a signed photo of Jim Henson. That's cool. And then I didn't forget about it. I just sort of went, oh, okay, well, I'll call them again when I'm older, and when I'm not 11. And then I went through school, and I graduated high school, and then I went to LAMDA, the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art, and studied stage management, technical theatre production management. Then I went into the West End of theatre, London, into the theatre for a couple of years. And then when I was 19, my mum left a message on my answer phone saying, you know, Jim Henson Company called and said, do you want to audition to train in kind of Muppet style performing? And I was blown away, because when you're 19, between the age of 11 and 19, it's half your life again. So this letter that I wrote half a life ago was suddenly, you know, coming back into my life. I was completely confused, because I thought, how can that be so? And then I called them, and they said, yeah, you know, come in like a week, I think it's like 10 days away, and show us what you can do. And that's where it all began.
Excellent. Well, I do want to talk about your beginnings with Henson, but I don't want to skip over, as you said, half your life. Were your parents supportive of your passion for puppetry?
Yeah. Yeah, they were. My mum's very funny, and she does lots of vocal impersonations and voices, and she did when we were kids. And so I liked that. I think that's what made me engage with, oh, I can do voices like the guys on the Muppet and girls on the Muppet Show do, because my mum does voices, so that I can sort of do that. So she's very funny in that way. My dad was very supportive of my odd ideas of where I was going career-wise. And oddly, it's worth mentioning at this point, my great-grandmother was a puppeteer in Vancouver, Canada. Which I didn't find out again until, I don't know, I think I was mid-teens at that point, when one of my aunties said, oh, you know, your great-grandmother was a puppeteer. And again, I was like, what? This is insane. I must get a photo of her actually and put it somewhere online, because she went around to schools and community centres and, you know, places, and did this little tabletop puppet show with little hand puppets, some of which I have now. They're amazing. Little sculpted heads and little bodies and stuff that she made. So yeah, that was weird, because again, that's another strange thing that happened so far. By the point at which I found that out, I was very into the whole thing and very chasing that kind of dream. And I thought, well, that's a neat little stitch back through time, you know?
Yeah, and I think it's probably easier for parents to understand if someone else in the family has made a living doing it.
Yeah.
As opposed to, we've been engineers our whole life, and now our kid wants to be a puppeteer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. It wasn't so. I mean, my mum always thought, I think because when I was a kid, I did lots of, I was kind of very wacky, you know, always doing crazy voices, always dressing up, always, you know, I was a very irritating child. So it was no surprise that I think when I landed on that was something that I could probably utilize this skill space. And then with her telling me about, it was weird, the great-grandmother thing, because I'm not sure my mum knew. It was just an auntie who came into our life who from Canada. My mum's mother was Canadian, and she just said, oh, I've got some photographs for you that you'd really like, and she sent the photos over without telling me that it was photos of my great-grandmother, and I was just, like I say, it was incredible. And my mum she was like, oh wow, that's amazing. That maybe it's in your genes, maybe it's in your DNA. Maybe it is. I don't know.
Well, I want to ask you about your time at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art. You say you studied stage management and sort of the tech side of things. Was there any performing in there, or were you just more to the tech side of things?
Well, what happened was I was in youth theatre as a kid, and I did acting jobs in professional theatre as a kid, playing kids in shows that need kids to play kids. And I sort of lost my bottle. I got a little worried and nervous about auditioning for drama colleges, and I thought, well, I want to keep my hand in because I enjoyed theatre very much, but I don't want to perform so much at the moment. And I did have this weird vision going forward of thinking, well, I could be an actor, but then if I get set on an actor's track, I can never go back onto the, trying to be a puppeteer track. I mean, again, you can, but as a kid, you don't understand that, you've got to have one vision, one sort of dream. So I had worked at the local theatre in technical, in the sort of technical department. So I was the electrics boy, which is the lowest down the ladder of the lighting department. And I trained as an electrics boy, and I did 2 years at the local theatre, maybe a year and a half at the local theatre in that way. And I worked alongside some great British writers and directors. I learned how theatre went together, and then just needed accreditation, because I mean that's all great, but when you're going for jobs in the West End theatre, you can't just go, well, I worked at my local theatre and I'm brilliant. So like you have to have some training, some formal training. So LAMDA, which has been open since the mid 1800s, is one of very often turns up in the top 3 drama schools in the world, is an extraordinary place. And to answer your question, they do give you a background training in the other bits of performance, because they want their stage managers to fully understand what actors' techniques are, and how to help actors if they have problems with either their voice or their physicality or whatever. So you do modules of theatre history, singing, voice, and a stage fight. Like you do full stage fight course, just so you're fully aware of how that all works. And again, all these things kind of feed into a sort of full and clear understanding of performance and performers and theatre. So I guess when I graduated there, I went in knowing a lot about lighting, but I came out with a full and thorough understanding of lighting, sound, prop making, tour management. We'd go on tour. We were on tour across Holland, Belgium, and Germany with a show. No tutors, just students going across Holland, Belgium, and Germany in a bus with a staff. So those kind of, it was an extraordinary, it still is a brilliant place to learn your craft. And so I guess, like I say, it definitely feeds into my daily work now. So the contributories and the things I learned there, I use on a daily basis. And when I'm never, ever kind of go a day without utilizing skills I learned back then.
And during this time, were you still fooling around with puppets and kind of building puppets and making your own shows and things like that?
I wasn't at this time, no. So I stopped doing the puppet stuff probably mid-teens, because then I started getting into helping out the local theatre, and I was doing youth theatre and stuff. And I kind of ran out of time for all that, for doing all those things. I did make some things for like friends. We made goofy videos when we were kids, so I made a few things for that. I remember making an alien character for that, those films. And I did, when I was at LAMDA, I did a sketch you have these in-house cabarets at LAMDA when the students take over the theatre. And I did this is really weird. I did a Star Wars sketch with a friend playing Luke and me being Yoda, and I made a puppet Yoda to make that work. And so that was the last puppet, actually. In fact, that was the last puppet I ever made.
Well, let's talk about this phone call from Henson. I mean, they called you and they asked you to come down. And what was the experience like walking into Henson for the first time for this audition or workshop?
Well, it was quite strange, because they were in Camden Town, which is a kind of interesting boho, cool part of London, and I sort of went around the corner, Oval Road, where the creature shop was. And as I went around the corner, I was thinking, where is this place? And then I just saw a line of like 500 people. And I went, there it is. So 2 things happened. One was I found it. That's good. And 2 was oh no, there's like 500 people here. I should just go back on, get the underground and go back home, because there's bound to be, these people are bound to have dedicated their lives to this. And I'm, I felt like a rookie, What I didn't know was that out of those 500, probably 400 were actors who were kind of going, yeah, puppeteering, I'll give it a shot. But how hard can it be? And then within that, there was probably, I don't know, I'm just pulling figures out of the air, but I'm sure there was 100 people who were pretty good. Yeah, so I got very disheartened for a minute, and then I thought, no, join the line. Come on, let's do this. And then Kevin Clash and Nigel Plaskett, who were the two guys running the Muppet Workshop that year, kind of called us in, and they kind of briefed us, and they said, right, you're going to do your thing and show us what you've got, and then it was a bit like those TV shows where they people get sent home, and it was kind of 25 people every sort of couple of hours, as I remember, and that was terrifying again, because they're like, okay, Kevin Clash would come in and go, okay, these are the people we thank you very much for coming, and I was like, oh no, please don't let my name be on the list. My dream. And luckily my name did not get read out until the end, when they said, these are I think it was 7 people that they trained that year. Usually it was 10. I think they trained 7. And they read the 7 names out. And I was like, like a cartoon character, where they kind of rub their eyes and double take and go, what? I think he said my name. I don't think this is a mix-up. I think he said my name. And they did. And because it was, my surname's Chapman, they read them out alphabetically. So I think I was the first or the second name they read out. So and then my world just tilted. I went, oh, you're gonna be trained by the Henson guys. And yeah, I was doing somersaults inside, and I thought, this is cool. This is very cool. So yeah, I couldn't believe it as well. That's the weird thing, is I genuinely couldn't believe it. I got the tube home that night, the subway back home that night, and I was like, this is crazy. This is what you've wanted since you were 5 years old. And these guys, when you go in tomorrow, maybe that was a Friday. So when you go in on the Monday, these guys are going to let you into the secrets. They're gonna show you how to do this really well. They're gonna fine tune what you have, and that is the golden ticket. I felt like Charlie Bucket in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
What was that first workshop like? Was it just basic sort of monitor training and just the basics of puppetry like that?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was all of that stuff that I'm sure you know very well, obviously, because you do it too. It was eye focus, monitor training, characterization and voice work, and team stuff where you work in teams of sort of 6 or 8. We did musical numbers where we were lifting, audio from I think we did Disney's a song from Disney's Aladdin, and we're lip syncing all the animated characters, obviously, with puppet characters. And they're choreographing quite complex. I mean, complex for a workshop, not complex for a movie, but complex for a workshop. Kind of sequences where everyone had to play their part and hit their mark, and do that kind of thing. We did improvisation, which I'm a huge, huge fan of, and I was a fan of it anyway. But I'm a huge fan today too. And I remember Kevin Clash saying to me, you should write. I mean, he wasn't saying you shouldn't puppeteer, but he said, you should write, because your stuff is, when you do improvisation, it's funny and stuff. And that was quite prescient, because a lot of my stuff, when I did get out working, lots of it was either written by me or was improvised live. So he kind of spotted that ability. And again, as a young, I think I was 20. That's very confidence building for somebody of that stature, to say, you're funny, or you have some sense of humor, or you understand comedy. That was a real lift. And I thought, well, that's cool, because if, again, that guy, he knows. So maybe, again, it was all these kind of little steps along the journey of going, I think I've got a shot at this. I think I've got a shot. I just have to keeping on, and believe in yourself, all that stuff. And those were all very important bricks in my development as a fan and a sort of an amateur to being a professional. They were massive confidence builders.
Yeah, indeed. And Sesame Street and Henson more recently have been doing these workshops. I think there's even one at Henson going on right now as we record this.
Wow.
What advice do you have to people who get into these workshops to sort of make the most of their time there?
Wow. I mean, savor every minute, because people say things to you in those workshops, and I've been in them since, when I've been, contributing and showing people how we do our stuff. Yeah, listen carefully. And if there's anything you want to, there's sometimes sentences get just thrown out into the ether. Somebody will say something about puppeteering or about your performance or about what you've been doing, and it'll be just gold. I learned there's so many things that get said, and they're real. They're hard to sort of explain what those individual things are, but then you just impart these nuggets of knowledge, and you go, oh yeah, so that's why. I remember the thing of really sort of slightly bad example, but I remember saying this thing. The guys who trained us saying, "Remember where the floor is." I'm sure you've been through this. So when you put a puppet up in the air on a video monitor, and you manipulate the puppet character, he walks in or she walks into the frame. When you're an amateur, you kind of bounce them around a little and float about. And I remember the guy saying to me, "Where's the floor? Where's the floor? How tall is your character?" And it was so weird because I'd never borne that much thought before. I just kind of went, "Well, the puppet's on chart. It looks okay. Let's go. Let's be funny." And then I suddenly went, "Oh yeah, that Muppet solidity, which Kermit and Fozzie and Piggy and all those guys have in Sesame Street characters, that kind of reality of going, they're walking on a floor, but because there's no floor there, you don't think about the floor, but the viewer does, because it looks more." And I remember that, just this kind of hallelujah moment where I just walked in onto shot after that and went, "Oh yeah, that's it, that control." And there's those things happen, as you know, every couple of hours somebody says something. So my advice would be, take it with both hands and embrace it and have an amazing time, because you will learn some fabulous things, and things that can serve you for the rest of your career if you keep practicing, keep working, keep moving forward.
Excellent. That is great advice. Well, after you took this workshop, did this sort of reignite your passion for puppetry? Because you said you had sort of stepped away from it for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, 100% did. And again, because I'd been in theatre, and I'd done, like I said, a few fun puppets for friends and for goofy videos, it definitely reignited my enthusiasm for it. I did go there, weirdly. When I was 16, I called up Neil Scanlon. No, 17. I called up Neil Scanlon, who is now Oscar-winning creature effects supervisor on Star Wars and Jurassic and all sorts, and a friend, and who I work for a lot. But I was 17, and I called him up and said, "Hey, I want to learn about the creature shop." And I thought maybe I could get in, I don't know, being like the T-boy or something like that in Creature Shop. And Neil very kindly said, "Yeah, come down and meet me." So when I was 17, I'd actually been to the previous Creature Shop, which every Henson geek will know was in Hampstead. And that's the one that Jim originally bought and set up in Downshire Hill, opposite the family house. So I went there and met with Neil, and he showed me around the workshop and explained how it all worked. And I said, "Could I be the T-boy, or is there any T-boy vacancy?" And he was like, "No, there's no T-boy vacancy." So yeah, I had been there earlier. I can't remember what the question was. Why was I saying that I'd been there already?
Well, I just asked if this workshop had sort of reignited your passion for puppetry.
Oh yeah. So yeah. So I suppose because I'd been there before, I didn't have an extinguished period of lack of enthusiasm. I did always like the stuff, but I was kind of, trying to work out, my training and get myself in some shape to get some money in, because I was getting to that age where, you leave home and you do, well, in those days, you leave home and go and do your own thing. So although I had that passion, and I was dropping into Creature Shop in that example to see Neil, and I was sort of very, very aware of puppet content that was being made, and hoovered it up like a geek, VHSs and trying to get shows that you couldn't get in the UK. I still had all that. I just wasn't a practicing puppeteer at that time. But so the enthusiasm was there, and then the training at Creature Shop in Camden definitely completely solidified my brain into going, you have a shot at this. These guys are professionals. They have confidence in you. They say you can do it. So go out there and give it a shot. And then I just had to wait to see what job vacancies were around. And Muppet Treasure Island, which is what I then obviously found out they were training people to have in the UK to do background on Muppet Treasure Island. That was the first project that came along later that year. So my first job out of Henson's was for Henson's on Muppet Treasure Island, which Brian Henson directed, and it was a fun movie. It was a great first movie. I think I was 2021, something like that.
Yeah, and you mentioned background puppetry. Were you just doing background puppetry, or were you assisting?
I am in Muppet Treasure Island. I can't remember assisting anybody. I'm pretty sure I'm just background. I didn't do loads on it. I think I did like 3 weeks, but I was doing sort of background raccoons and crabs and pigs and frogs and the standard background Muppet stuff. Yeah, I don't think I did assist. That came later. I didn't do it for very long, I have to say. I'm one of the people who got in very, very luckily, and I've only assisted in the last since I became a known puppeteer, if that makes any sense. I never assisted when I was coming up the ladder because I landed a really peachy job very quickly off the back of Muppet Treasure Island. And I never actually went to work as an assistant, but I'm very happy to do it now, and I really enjoy it. I think it's a nice day at the office because you don't have to stress too much about everything, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have any moments? Are there any moments in Muppet Treasure Island? I mean, I know you're saying you were doing background stuff and it's not always featured, but where you can go, yep, that's me right there.
Yeah, there's a shot that I know very well where I am and who I am, and I'm bouncing around like a maniac trying to upstage. It's I think Kevin Bishop. It's when Kevin Bishop, who plays is it Jim Hawkins? I can't remember his name. He sees the Hispaniola for the first time, and there's a tracking shot where he's like looking up in awe at the ship, and there's some raccoons in the background carrying things that are being loaded onto the ship, and I know which one of those raccoons I am. But the rest of it does slightly disappear. I remember being in water in the island in waders. I remember doing a crab. I don't know where he is in the movie. I remember when I went to the cinema, I saw like 6 or 7 bits that I'd done and went, oh wow, look, that's, my stuff's in the movie, which again was a great treat, even though it's deep background. I was like, wow, look, I did a Muppet thing and that's me. It was amazing. Again, mind blowing.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned getting a show right after Muppet Treasure Island. Was that Otis the Aardvark?
Yes. How do you know this stuff, Grant?
I do my research.
Your research, yeah, clearly.
How did the opportunity to perform as Otis come about?
Well, this is a strange story as well. None of my stories are straightforward. I hope they're interesting. This was nothing to do with anything that I'd applied myself for or to. I was at college with a fantastic actor called Alistair Petrie, who's over here, is in a big show over here called Sex Education. But he bumped into me at a London tube station, and he knew I did puppets. He knew I'd done the Henson workshop, and he said, Dave, you still doing puppets? And I went, yeah, I'm just getting off the blocks. I went to Henson's and I trained, and I just did some Muppet Treasure Island. And he said, I've got this friend who works at the BBC and they're looking for a puppeteer. And I said, oh, that sounds cool. And he said, do you want me to give you her number? And I said, yeah, that would be great. So I just phoned Fiona Thompson, who was a researcher at the BBC, and said, hi, I'm Al's friend. I trained Jim Henson Company quite recently, and I know how puppets work and blah, blah. And she said, oh, yeah, come in for a meeting. So the following week, I went in for a meeting on the Tuesday, and I was on air on live TV on the Thursday with no previous experience. Of live television, which is a very different discipline, as you know, to movies and recorded TV. Live is a whole different ballpark. But I learned live. It was weird. I learned on the job. So I wasn't very good for about 3 months, and the puppet wasn't very good for about 3 months. Because when I joined, I said, this puppet is very ugly, and no one's ever gonna love this character because it's very badly. It wasn't very well built. It was built by not a non-puppet builder, but very luckily I knew three fabulous people who helped me out, and they all have Muppet provenance. So do you want me to tell you the story as to what happened with this bad puppet that I didn't like?
Yes, of course.
I happen to know and have been working with David Barclay, who was a Muppet luminary. I was inside, Jabba the Hutt, and he assisted Frank on Empire Strikes Back, and he'd done all the Muppet features. He had a company with Mike Quinn, who again will be familiar to your podcast listeners. Mike Quinn is another Muppet veteran from the UK, who plays Nine Numb in the Star Wars movies, and done tons of Muppet projects in the UK. And Karen Prell, who is another Muppet luminary from Fraggle Rock, Red Fraggle, and Yolanda Rat, and various other exciting Muppet characters. I knew those three. They ran a company, and I just called them up and said, guys, I'm doing this job at the BBC. They basically offered me the job, and the puppet's awful. But they said to me, if I'm coming and I'm good and I'm funny, then they'll let me get somebody to rebuild the puppet, which is kind of, again, very weird. That wouldn't happen these days, because when you launch a puppet character, as you know, nowadays, it's got to be as it is. You put it on screen. There's no time to go, oh, we're going to change the puppet out in a few weeks because we don't like this one. That doesn't happen. So I talked to Mike and Dave and Karen. Karen designed Otis the Aardvark on the back of a script, and Mike and Dave built Otis the Aardvark. And then after 3 months of being on the BBC, I swapped it. So one day on a Wednesday, Otis was this slightly like bad, shabby looking thing. And then the next day, it was like a brilliantly designed, nice, fluffy, interesting, engaging puppet character built by Mike and Dave and designed by Karen. And at that point, the character took off. Because, you have to have a good design that kids can, fall in love with or be amused by. And, it has to be a wonderful puppet just before anyone picks it up. So yeah, kind of weird roundabout kind of way. Saw a friend at a tube station, got a job interview, got the job, did a bad puppet for 3 months, swapped the puppet, and then it went great. And from that point on, I was on air sort of every day except Sundays for exactly 5 years, 94 to 99, and did 3,500 hours of live TV.
That is incredible. And talk about a training. I mean, after that, I just feel that you would know how to do anything in television, Yeah. Incredible boot camp.
Yeah, it is. It's an amazing training, because the only problem with it is, and it's not a negative side to it. I had the best fun. I was on press junkets, meeting, discussing movies with movie stars like you do to promote their films. I was working with British recording artists, pop stars, great presenters. There's a real wealth of good presenters in the UK, and really good BBC content editors. They're worth mentioning. Producers and content editors, people who essentially keep you on track and don't go, well, do what you want. We don't care. They teach you that editorial. And I was writing sketches for the character, endlessly writing sketches, so that the only negative side of a job like that is it eats material. So you can write every single week. You are just writing. And then, hey, guess what? And then Monday, a whole nother bunch of writing. And then the following week, a whole nother bunch of writing. So it is so fantastic as a training ground, because you just write hours and hours and hours of television, and you learn almost on the job. So if you shoot comedy sketches, I used to shoot 25 minutes of sketches with the puppet character a week, on top of all the live links. And when I was watching the sketches back, I just was learning on the job. Why doesn't that play so well? Or why is that not funny? Or, and I learned about duration and brevity. And the whole thing was an incredible sandbox to kind of, it wasn't a sandbox because I was on TV, but for me, it was a great way of just learning all of those skills and talents, and improv, because live television often goes off the rails. My favorite part of live television is when it goes off the rails. And you got to think on your feet. And again, that's something that you can talk about all day and all night, but until you're on air, and we had millions of viewers back in those days, because there was only a few channels in the UK. So our peak viewing was 6.5 million, and in the UK that was big figures. And you've got 6.5 million people watching you. Don't screw up. You better be good. Come on, be funny. And there's also a B plot to all of that, which is live television has timings. So you are constantly on timings. In your ear, you have the production assistant who is telling you how long you have. So you'll have a 4:30 link into a program, or you'll have a 9-minute link into another program. And you can't say, oh, I want 9.5, or I want 4:35. They go, well, you have 4:30. So as well as doing your content, you're constantly listening to how much time you have left to get that content out and through. And that's another great lesson, because it teaches you, like a radio DJ, it teaches you what 10 seconds feels like, or what you can do in 10 seconds is amazing. Everyone would think 10 seconds is nothing, but you can do a lot in it. And it teaches you what 4 minutes feels like, and 2 minutes. And so, yeah, all of that stuff was, again, great sort of great knowledge and great stuff that fed into my development as a puppeteer.
I have also found that when you do something like that over and over and over again, and something goes wrong, which things will go wrong, doing it so many times, you just brush off when things go wrong. It's like, oh, this has happened before. It'll happen again. It's no big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. The train, I always say flying hours, like you're an airline pilot. I mean, it's a lot sillier than being an airline pilot, but it's those flying hours. Once you get those under your belt, and you've dealt with all those different situations. I remember one time we were on air, and the gallery, you have a gallery of people talking to you in your ear, the director, producer, production assistant, and they all disappeared. So it went silent. There's nothing scarier than when you're on live TV and your earpiece goes dead, because you're like, what's happening? Everyone's disappeared. And then another voice came on from what's called NC1, which is where the BBC One was controlled by. There was a guy in there controlling the entire BBC One. And his voice came through and said, you have 10 seconds to wrap. We're going live to Downing Street. And the Prime Minister was resigning. But again, so we're on kids' telly going, oh, wacky, oh, I can't believe it, oh, that's fine, ha ha. And then we go, well, sorry, we're going now. We didn't know why. Sorry, we've got to go now, but we hope to see you back tomorrow. And we're wrapped. And we're thinking, that's weird, what's happened? And it sort of faded to black on our screens, and then it faded up, and there was John Major, who was the Prime Minister at the time, telling the country that he decided to resign. And we were thinking, wow, I'm not sure our audience are that interested in this. Who's the old guy? What's he saying?
Right.
So there's moments like that where it's really unique. But like you said, a lot of time when things go wrong, when contributors go crazy, or contributors are improvising with you, because often, as you know, you get to work with a lot of actors and movie actors and TV actors and comedians and stuff. And when you can riff with people and have a great time learning all that stuff. Like I say, just being a guy from nowhere, like I was just, Johnny Nobody. But then the next thing, I'm on TV and I have a chance to improvise with some people who oftentimes are people I thought were fantastic, people I admired, and was like, how am I on TV doing this with this person? So all of that stuff was like I say, a fantastic bedrock for what then happened in the next 20 years.
And I think that playing a part like Otis is really neat because, especially playing him for 5 years, you sort of become a part of people's childhoods. Have you found that people remember watching Otis every day?
Yes, yeah, all the time. And it makes me, as it happens, the people obviously get older as the years go by who say this to you. When I was first, I'm trying to think, I remember there was runners on films who were like 20, 21. And the runner would kind of sidle up to you and say, hey, Dave, I learned something about you the other day. And I knew exactly what they were going to say next. They go, were you Otis the Aardvark? And I'd say, yeah. And it would blow their minds because they go, I used to watch it every day and I loved Otis or whatever. But no one's ever asked me and said they didn't like Otis, but I suppose they wouldn't tell me. But yeah, they always ask if I did the voice. I'll do his voice in a minute, but my register is naturally quite low. I'm going to step off the mic because it's loud. But his voice was like this. Oh my goodness, I cannot believe it. I'm very excited to be here. So that's his voice. So people would say, were you Otis the Aardvark? Yes. And then they go, but did you do the voice? Like, I'm sure he didn't do the voice. And then I do that I just did. And they go, oh, wow, that's so weird. We didn't think you did the voice. We thought you just moved the character. I was like, no, you have to do the voice as well. Otherwise it gets a little strange. So yeah, they did. And it's really nice, actually. It happens a lot because I've done a few things over the years which just drop into different age groups, childhoods, and so it still happens now. I just did a project for Lucasfilm, and the director's assistant used to watch a show I did on Saturday morning children's from kind of 2003 to 2007, I think, and she was freaking out. She was like, wow, that's crazy, I don't believe you did that show, because that was another chunk of somebody's childhood. And then I'm doing one now as well, weirdly. I'm doing a Saturday morning live kids show right now called Saturday Mashup for the BBC. And I know that in 10 years time, somebody will say, hopefully, if I'm still here, they'll say, did you do Stanley the Monster on Saturday Mashup? And I go, yes. And they'll say it was when I was a kid. And I'll go, no. No, it's a real pleasure. I'm so lucky. I mean, that's the thing is I always feel lucky that you can do stuff that people know and see and recognize and lasts or endures, because I mean, with YouTube, everything endures, but these people are mostly speaking from a memory point of view, and it's very flattering and it makes it all worthwhile in a weird way. But it's really strange when they say something like, do you remember that day when you were at Wimbledon and then there was you had the tennis ball? And I'm going, I don't remember. I remember going to Wimbledon, but I always say, you've got to remember I did thousands of hours of this stuff. And I think they think I'm a bit old and I've forgotten. But it's the fact that, like, we went to Wimbledon every year and covered Wimbledon because the BBC, used to cover Wimbledon so we could just walk in at the Wimbledon Lawn Tennis Club. And so people do mention things, you just go, yeah, I sort of vaguely remember that. Like, but it was so funny, and the thing happened with the thing, and then this person, and I go, yeah, no, I vaguely remember. But I do remember some landmark things I did with that character, or people I interviewed, or whatever. But day to day, I mean, gee, so much. You know, I was on air every day for ages.
During this time, and I mean, I know you were doing a few other kind of shows as well, but during this time, were you developing your own stuff to try and pitch and to get on the air?
Yeah, we there were more segments or contributories to other people's shows. So myself and Damien Farrell, who is a puppeteer, also trained at Henson Workshop, who's brilliant, who we still work together now a lot. He and I pitched into BBC Saturday live Saturday mornings. We pitched in double act giant hamster that was genetically modified by accident in a laboratory, and a small duck who was his manager, and they were called Tiny and Mr. Duck. So we developed those ourselves and paid for the build, and shot tests with them, and then we pitched them into the BBC to go and be part of another show for them. We did sort of puppet characters for various people and for commercials and bits and pieces. So yeah, there was always that desire to, you know, have control at the outset, and that was probably born of me going into the BBC, and you know, that story I told earlier about having a sort of a puppet that wasn't very good and then having to rebuild it. That taught me the lesson, which I still again think about today, which is the puppet's got to be built by a puppet builder, and it's got to be built to a design which you think is appealing and enduring and will work. And the only way to do that really is to do it yourself and go, this is what I've got, this is what I believe in, this is what I think will work for you, as opposed to what used to happen oftentimes, and sometimes happens now, is you get a call and someone says, do you want to do this? And then you'll see the puppet character they've already built, and they just haven't gone through they haven't gone through a puppet builder. You know, they haven't gone to a creative who advertises themselves as such and is exemplary at building puppets. They often will talk to a friend who once made some props for the local amateur dramatics theatre, or a friend who makes dresses, and you go, I'm sure they're amazing prop makers, I'm sure they're amazing dressmakers, but puppet builders are a very specific bunch of people. If you consult them, they will build you a wonderful puppet. If you try and go in the back door by, oh, my friend has some fabric and once used a sewing machine in 1989, that won't work. So I've learned that lesson, and I now design my puppet characters as well, because again, I just feel like I just know I can work with that, and I look at it and go, right, that's cool. And I still do things nowadays where I won't walk away. I sometimes do walk away and say, look, I just don't think this is for me, because they have got a puppet which it would never fall in love with. It could never be appealing. And, you know, we're working at, you know, I always think the level of the stuff that's out there now, you've got to work at the level of what's out there. You can't go, oh, well, it'll be all right. You know, it looks a bit cross-eyed and the fur looks like it was from a, you know, cheap market, but it'll be fine. I'll be funny and it'll work. It just doesn't. You know, the puppets need to be things of beauty or things of ugly if they're monsters. Otherwise, you know, the tool isn't right. So yeah, I guess that's another principle I learned along the path, is be confident with what you have and make sure you're happy with it. So yeah, that was a long answer. Sorry.
No, it was perfect. It was perfect. You know, I was looking through your IMDb and your Wikipedia, and you've worked on so many shows, and we really don't have the time to stop and go through every single one of them in great detail. But I did want to ask about the Puppet Game Show, because that was a project that you worked on again with the Jim Henson Company.
Yes, yeah. Puppet Game Show was a Henson BBC co-production, and I auditioned. That wasn't like, yeah, just get Dave. I auditioned along with everybody else, and I played the host, Dougie, who was like a British sort of game show host, slightly cheesy game show host. And then I played 3 other characters in the show, and I was working with some of the puppeteers from Puppet Up, Victor Yerrid, Colleen Smith, the legendary Louise Gold, Muppet royalty, original Muppet Show cast, and some other British puppeteers. And it was a fun experience. It was a strange show, because it was sort of, the BBC wanted something that pulled up the qualities of the Puppet Up improvised show, which I know you've done. I guested in Edinburgh, and I've seen many times, and it's a fantastic night at the theatre. And they wanted to sort of utilize that sort of stuff and put it into a TV format. And so they decided a game show would be the way to do it, with celebrity guests. Reflectively, and I'm sure no one on the team would be angry at me for saying, they sort of missed the fact that the unique selling point of Puppet Up is improvisation. And what we then did was a scripted show with celebrities. I think what they could have, if they'd been a little more relaxed about improvisation and trusted the performers, Brian Henson, cast the show with the guys in London, the BBC guys as well, and he brought on people who he thought could do all that. But then what it sort of transmogrified into was a scripted show. So it only lasted one season, and that's my reason why I think it only lasted one season, is it didn't feel loose enough. It felt too scripted and too staid, and the whole point of doing it in the first place was, hey, isn't it fun when puppets improvise? And we did, funnily enough, we did do sort of sections of, Victor Yerod always jokes about this, we did huge sections of improv, and then Victor's like, and none of it's in the show. So they just wanted a much more trad show. So essentially it could have been done by human beings as opposed to puppets. There wasn't much, like we never threw puppets to the wall, we never blew puppets up, we never stretched any puppets' arms or shut their heads in cupboard doors, or we didn't do anything with the puppets that you couldn't do with a human. So essentially it could have been called That Human Game Show. All the cast could have been human, but it was fun, and it was really fun to do, and I enjoyed very much working with that group. There was a very nice team of people on it, and people who I have worked with since, and I met them all on that show, so it was lovely.
Having done so much improv, both in the live TV shows and things like that, do you have a preference for doing scripted work or improv work?
Oh, that's so hard. If the script's really good, scripted. If the script's not very good, improv. It's the short answer. Yeah, I like doing. I mean, when the script's good and you read it, you think this is great fun and what a pleasure to deliver these lines, because it always, you always get the credit. You often say, "Well, the writer wrote it. I didn't. I just said it." But if the script's good, I'm happy delivering script. But most times, I feel like improv is a huge chunk of my work. Even today, I go and shoot VTs, little insert films for the show that I do right now. And we very, very loosely script it. We'll go to an odd place. So the character I do now visits different towns in the UK and basically makes jokes about them. So he visits, like, he doesn't go to the big star attraction of the town. He'll go and see what the council's bin policy is, or he'll go and see like a really dodgy, a down, dirty part of the neighborhood, and just make it like a travelogue. But it's sort of that weird dichotomy of he's going, wow, it's great here, and everything he sees is a bit rubbish. And it's massively improvised. We have a structure and we have a script and we have some get out of jail free cards, so we have some dialogue that I can say whatever happens, but then I often go completely off script, and that's where I really get my job satisfaction is and also talking to people. It's great because you can improvise with real people. When I go into the towns, I don't meet celebrities or actors, I meet real people who are, for example, I met a guy recently who ran the British Lawnmower Museum. I mean, this is a room of 800 lawnmowers, but his name is Brian. He's massively enthusiastic about lawnmowers. He knows everything there is. He has Prince Charles and Princess Diana's lawnmower. He has Brian May from Queen's lawnmower. So it's a really interesting place. But when you talk to Brian, wonderful things happen, because you can, I can ask him the stock questions, like, well, are you interested in lawnmowers and stuff? But then you can just drill down into the fun stuff, and people love it as well, because they'll tell puppets anything. Because you say to them beforehand, I'm not taking the mickey, I'm not being rude. The puppet is stupid, he doesn't understand, because he's a little monster, why a person would be interested in owning 800 lawnmowers and opening it to the public. So he's going to ask crazy questions, and with that they just go, oh, okay. And I mean, I'm never making light of them or being nasty. It's funny from a monster's perspective to say, he's got a funny voice. He talks like this. He's like, why do you bother with lawnmowers when you could just like scatter some stones out there or get some of that plastic grass? Then you'd never have to push a lawnmower again. And the guy's like, what are you talking about? Lawnmowers are brilliant. So yeah, it's all that kind of stuff. And I love improvisation very much.
Well, during this time, you still did a lot of creature work, 101 Dalmatians, Prometheus. But I wanted to talk to you about, of course, Star Wars, because you are one of the puppeteers that brought the incredible BB-8 to life. How did this opportunity to work on Star Wars come about?
What I failed to say earlier on was my two obsessions as a kid were the Muppets and Star Wars. So again, very odd things were rumbling around when 7 was on the slate to be made. And it's worth seeing it with when they made Phantom Menace in the UK, which was back end of the 90s. I was being Otis the Aardvark at the time, but believe me, I was writing and ringing Nick Dudman, who did the creature effects on those movies. I'm going, I've just got to go. I love Star Wars. I'm going, please. And they didn't have much on that movie. He wasn't lying to me. They didn't have much. He kind of said, we don't really have a lot of creature stuff in this movie. It's very digital. There's a few bits and pieces, but he said, we don't need any puppeteers. Thanks for getting in touch. So I was devastated because I thought, oh my goodness, Star Wars is shooting in London. I'm not on it. So that just, that people used to ask me, by the way, what's your ambition in the industry from when I was a kid, from when I was like 20? And I was saying, my ambition is unfortunately never going to happen because it's to work on a Star Wars movie. And I've missed that bus, because they made them in 77, 80, and 83. So I'm never going to achieve my ambition. And then when they made the Phantom Menace, I got even more miserable about it. And people would say, late 90s, early 2000s, what's your ambition? And I go, it's to do Star Wars, but I haven't done it. And they did it. And there was no jobs in it. And I didn't work on it. And I was very sad. Kat Smee, who's a brilliant British puppeteer, she worked on one of those prequels. I think that's on Phantom Menace, actually. And I was so angry. I was like, Kat's got the Star Wars thing, and I don't have it. And I love Kat, so I was very happy she had it. But equally, I was going, why am I not? I should be on it. Anyway, cut to 2014. I think 2014 was when I started hearing rumbles about Star Wars. We had done, myself and Brian Herring, who's the other puppeteer who performs BB-8, we had done Prometheus with Ridley Scott, and the creature supervisor on that was Neil Scanlon. Neil's next job was getting the Star Wars stuff together for Force Awakens. And I think we were sort of fresh in his mind. We'd just done that stuff for him. And so they called and said, oh, actually Brian was there doing research and development on BB-8 with Josh Lee and Matt Denton, who built and make BB-8 happen. And he called me up, said, signed to Neil, and thought we'd get you in. And I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. So I went in, and actually BB-8 was in construction when I went in. He wasn't a fully working thing, so he was still being constructed, but we were working with we did work in advance. Brian had a little miniature one, actually, that Josh had built as a kind of proof of concept. And then when BB-8 was finished, we then got our hands on him, and we had 10 days with him on a soundstage, so a huge empty soundstage at Pinewood. And we had 10 days to figure out how this character is performed, because it has many servos and many motors, and it has many aspects and things it can do, but it's translating those as a team, myself and Brian and Matt Denton, who's another performer who drives the fully performable BB-8. We had to just figure out how does this thing look curious? How does it look happy? How does it look sad? How does it look frightened? How does it look scared? And again, that building a vocabulary of movement for a puppet character is a lot easier, and there's a lot of precedence. This is me trying to say it was really hard, Grant. It was really hard. When you're doing a puppet character, all your go-tos. Oh, okay, when I look sad, I do this, and when I'm stressed, I do this. And this character's funny because he has this shaped head to do this. But with BB-8, it was like there was no precedent. There was no. We just had to build it from the ground up, and it was quite scary. I have to say, it was quite intimidating. Everyone was like, I couldn't tell anyone what I was doing. I kept saying, oh, I'm doing a really cool job, but it's quite scary, and I want to get it right. And it's quite, I drive home from the studio thinking, have we got this? Is this okay? Are they going to like, is this all right? And then after those 10 days elapsed, they then flew. That movie was shot roughly in chronological order. So we shot the desert first, Planet Jakku, where the story sort of starts. And so we just lost him. So after 10 days, that was it. So it was like, if after 10 days you don't have this, it's going on a shipping crate and it is going into the desert, and you're going to see it in 2 weeks' time. So there was a clock ticking on that, where there was no point in driving home going, have we got this? Is it okay? It was just basically go to work. We have to make this great. It's in like 80% of the script. It has to be great. So it was that sort of do or die thing, really. And luckily it all went okay. But I have to say that everyone always assumes that it just is, you go there, switch it on, blah blah, look at this, it's brilliant, and then you go home. But the truth is, everything has been thought through. Every shot, every line of dialogue, everything that we do on that movie, and on the other movies, we've done already on a rehearsal room floor. We've shot it out, we've had a look at it, we've seen how it can be better, how it can be funnier, how it can be whatever. because by the time you get to the set, there's no time to go, hey, let's try this. It's an expensive movie, and there are lots of contributories to a shot. There'll be stunt performers, background artists, the principals, and there'll be lots of technicians, firing pyrotechnics, and obviously shooting and gripping and doing all the things you got to do when you make a movie. That's not the time to go, I wonder what BB-8 thinks about this. It's like, okay, we know we've got to run into there. We've got to hit that mark. We've got to look at Oscar Isaac. We've got to look worried about the fact we think that we're going to get blown up. And we've got, it's all that. So therefore, it is not a thing you do on the fly. Everything in those movies is very well thought through, and they're an absolute pleasure. They're meticulous, but they're, again, another color on the palette where you just go, this is unlike anything I've ever done, and probably unlike anything I'll ever do. It's a ball and a half dome, and we have to make that an appealing character. So yeah, let's see. And luckily, like I say, it worked out. We started seeing tattoos when the trail dropped. Brian and I and Matt and Josh, we'd see stuff online like, oh, there's a guy who got the tattoo of the character on his arm just from the trailer. And we were kind of laughing, going, what if he saw the film and thought the character was rubbish? What if he saw the film? Oh no, I've got that droid on my arm and it's terrible. So yeah, we saw sort of somebody with pregnancy, again, before the movie came out. There's a lady who was pregnant and she got body paint to make her pregnancy bump into BB-8. And we were like, this is weird. People are liking this design and they're liking the character. So again, that's testament. Christian Altsman and Jake Lunt Davis, who both created the designs on BB-8, created the design of BB-8. That again is testament to the stuff I said earlier of it has to be a good design. So those elements, they all went together. And under, there's so many people who make that character what it is, to fabricate that character, and that sort of impossibleness of his levitating head, which when they rolled it out at Star Wars Celebration, we've got this great still frame on the office wall where there's the guy who's an attendee, he's a fan who's at Celebration, and they roll out BB-8 and the studio cameras cut around the auditorium to look at people's reactions. There's one guy and he is literally, his mouth could not be wider, his eyes could not be wider, and he's looking at it like, how is that being done? And at that point, which was pre-movie, we were like, we've got him. We've definitely got him. He looks like he's just seen space travel for the first time. This guy was fantastic because he did what we wanted everyone to do, was to go, how on earth are they doing that? How does that even begin to work? So, when the movie came out and, he emotes and he's a fun character, and Ray and him have a fun relationship in the way that Mark Hamill and R2 had a fun relationship. We were like, oh, great, happy days, great fun. And it was a huge, huge privilege to do. And I'm really proud of the stuff we did,
Yeah. Well, I mean, BB-8 is iconic now. He is up there with R2-D2. I mean, R2-D2 may not agree with that, but he is up there. And the other thing I wanted to ask about Star Wars was, you said that the last puppet you built was a Yoda puppet, but then you got to assist Frank Oz in The Last Jedi in performing Yoda.
Yes, I did. Another mind-bending phone call where Neil Scanlon, who obviously we've established I worked for a lot on the movies, he said, you can't tell anybody, completely confidential. Don't talk to any puppeteers about it. Don't talk to anyone in Lucasfilm about it. No one knows we're doing this, but we're going to do Yoda again. And so my brain was just this kind of nanosecond ticking through, going, okay, I really hope he's going to say Frank. I really hope he's going to say puppet. And he says, Frank Oz. It's a puppet. We're doing it. And I was like, great. And he said Frank wants to do it with exactly the same technology that was available in '79 when they shot The Empire Strikes Back. So we went back to non-remote control transmitters. Everything in the Yoda we did was cable controlled, very old fashioned, like the origins of puppeteering for movies. And it's a foam, it's a foam head. It's not a silicon head or a digital head. There's no augmentation. It just is what it is. Frank said he's in if we do it like that. And that was just beautiful music to my ears. I was like, oh, this is great. We're going to do Yoda as Yoda was done in Empire Strikes Back. which, you know, Jim consulted on. Jim was asked to do it and couldn't do it, as I'm sure you know, was too busy and passed it on to Frank. But Jim was there consulting and kind of going, you need to do, with Stuart Freeborn, who created Yoda originally. And so, yeah, that was just hugely appealing. But then Neil said, you have to meet Frank and you have to interview with him, because I've said that, you know, you'd be good to do it, but you need to, basically, he wants to know what you're like. So I had to go to meet Frank at Pinewood Studios, and this is great. I've never told this story, but Frank played me his stuff from The Empire Strikes Back. Oh, by this time, by the way, he said, Neil said, can you get 2 other people to join in? And you think who could be the ears and who could be the eyes? And I was going to be the hands. And so I'm there with Damien Farrell and Colin Purvis. So 2 other puppeteers. And Frank sits there and says, I'm going to play you my stuff from Empire Strikes Back. And I want you to tell me when you see anything you think is bad. So you're like, wow, hang on a minute. Here I am, sat watching it. Frank's work from The Empire Strikes Back with Yoda, probably one of the most important puppet characters on film of the 20th century. And he's asking me to watch this and tell him when it's bad. All 3 of us, well, we had no time to discuss this, because right off the back of that sentence, he pressed play. So none of us could say, this is weird. Oh, you want to speak first? I don't want to tell him it's bad. You know, so funny enough, I was the first person to call stop. And I went, stop. And Frank said, yeah, what? And I said, oh, the iMac closes a little quicker on the left eye than the right eye when you blink there. And he was like, excellent, moving on. And then we pressed play again. And so essentially, we weren't criticizing Frank's performance. It was like we were looking at real minutiae of, you know, it's a great sequence. There's nothing wrong with it. But he was trying to find out if we as puppeteers could really see when things weren't absolutely immaculate and perfect. It doesn't matter, because the performance is amazing. But he was just trying to check that we weren't like, wow, Frank Oz, we think you're the greatest. Everything you've done is amazing. Nothing you've ever done is terrible. So I think we stopped it about 10 times, and we're just spotting really geeky technical puppet things, which don't affect the scene, but he asked us. And then at the end of that, he hired us all. So he was like, great, you got the job. So that was it. And I love that, because as with all things with Frank Oz, who, as we know, is a genius. And that word gets used super commonly, but Frank really is. And he wrote the rule book for character puppets. You know, him and Jim Henson wrote the rule book of how you create an appealing and fun characterful character. So yeah, it was weird. And then we went into rehearsals with him for 30 days. The sequence in the movie, I think, is about 4 minutes, but we rehearsed flat out for 30 days. Just so Frank's got this thing, because he's a film director, obviously. He's got this thing of like, we've got to be pitch perfect, and then they can put the camera anywhere. So which is very, again, you'll know from puppet experience, most puppet things are addressed to a camera, or you figure out, okay, that works on the A camera, but that oblique shot will work for the other thing where we open the microwave oven or whatever. But with Yoda, he was like, everything we do here is a performance. The whole thing is 360. That means the director can shoot from any angle and it will look great. And that's why 4 minutes took 30 days. You know?
Wow. What an amazing, another boot camp to sit through with an amazing teacher.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And, you know, sorry, that's my phone. Yeah, he was an amazing, amazing opportunity again. But just that thing of Damien and I and Colin would say, that's the guy, you know, he'd leave the room and we go, isn't it weird? That's the guy who's in those photos with Jim Henson in the 60s. You know, when we look at pictures of Frank with hair and like those old fashioned black rimmed glasses he wore as kind of mid 20s, I guess. And we go, it's the same guy. It's still the same, because he's such a folklore character, you know, in all of our readings and all of our research and all of our viewings over the years, and subsequently on YouTube, watching making ofs and talking heads and Frank talking about puppeteering. We go, that is that guy. That really is Frank Oz. But then he's no truck with any of that, because he doesn't want any fandom. He doesn't want you to be, you know, he doesn't want you to be in awe of him in any way. He's incredibly humble. I'm sure you've seen him and interviewed, or you might have met him. He is an extraordinary an extraordinary individual, hugely inspirational, hugely positive, and very very funny, and I'm picky about that stuff. I won't say someone's very funny unless they're very funny, but he could really crack us up. He's got an excellent sense of humor, which you then make sense of all of the stuff he's done in the past. And he's a huge fan of biscuits, or cookies, as you guys call them. So that's where Cookie Monster came from. And there's just elements of his character where you go, oh yeah, I get it. That's what that comes. But he won't do the voices. Like he won't, he doesn't come to work and do funny Miss Piggy or funny Cookie Monster voice. That's then and this is now, and we're doing something else. But I'm sure if we asked him to, he might have done. But he doesn't have that ego to go, I'm Frank Oz and I've done all this amazing work. When you praise him, he's always terribly embarrassed and humble about things that you saw of his.
Well, what an incredible double whammy to not only get to work on Star Wars, but then to get to work on Star Wars with Frank Oz on Yoda.
Yeah.
It's pretty great.
Yeah, amazing.
Well, of course, as we wind down here, I have to ask you about the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. And I know that you played the Emperor in that, but were you a fan of the original Dark Crystal?
Yeah, I was a huge fan of the original Dark Crystal. I went to see it in a double bill with, I think, Clash of the Titans when I was a kid. And again, I went home, I made plasticine models of the characters. I drew the characters, as did Neil Sternberg, actually, who plays the lead, Rhiannon, in the show. He was the same. He went to the movie cinema and he came back and started drawing them and thinking about just the design. I mean, Brian Froud's design work, I mean, aside from the incredible stuff that Jim and Frank brought that vision to the screen, a movie with no human beings in it, this was so extraordinary, and just beautiful design work and lots of things that your brain just couldn't figure out. I couldn't figure out how certain things were done. I wanted to know how does a fizz roll into shot and then it starts talking because it rolled in. So how could it do that and then talk? And so there's lots of things like that. So yeah, I was a massive fan of the original, and it's always been enjoyed. It was always the VHS was always on my shelf, and then latterly the DVD and the Blu-ray. And I'd always get it out, once a year, have a look at it, and kind of go, it's a really interesting piece because it was so adventurous and so out there to do at that time. But that's Jim Henson, right? Originality, original thinker, new ideas. Let's do this because no one's done it. And I think people said to him, I think I know anecdotally that people said, "You're no humans? You sure? There's always a guest in the Muppet show, you have guests in the Muppet movies. What, no humans?" And he was like, "Yeah, we want to do it. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens." And I mean, now it's cult classic. I mean, I know it wasn't massively profitable when it first came out, but now everyone acknowledges that it was, a bit of a groundbreaker. A lot of the technology that was created for the Dark Crystal is technology we still use today. And if he hadn't have made the Dark Crystal, we may have not, that technology may not have been birthed, and maybe animatronics would be way further back than they are now. So it's an really important movie, a seminal movie in the sense of creature effects. A really important movie. So yes, that's a very long answer again to the fact that yes, I love the Dark Crystal. I thought it was great.
No, that's great. That's great. And well, getting to perform one of the Skeksis, which the Emperor was one of the Skeksis, performing puppets that are that big and that heavy. What steps do you take to make sure that you don't injure yourself while performing?
Wow, that's a good question. We have, you've got to be physically fit because they are monstrously heavy. I mean, they're not monstrously heavy, they're just very awkward. I mean, the heads are quite heavy, they have animatronics in them, and your arm is above your head, like Carol Spinney would do Big Bird. So your arm is directly above your head. So the jaw is above your jaw by the length of your arm. So you're constantly working in that position. The costume is quite weighty, so it's not so much the puppet that's weighty, it's the costume stuff, because in those there's so many layers in Dark Crystal costuming. Beautiful design by Brian and Wendy. So there'd be like a silk fabric with a kind of a crinoline, and then a netting, and then rings and jewelry and a ruff, and so all of that stuff adds up to this incredibly accumulative weight. And you strap it on like a rucksack. The body is strapped on like a rucksack with all that stuff in it, and then you put your arm through the top where the neck hole is, and then they'll put the head onto your hand once you're in. But it's absolutely no word of a lie. We had a heat wave that summer, and we would all come out of those Skeksis sequences with our clothes completely soaking wet. So you absolutely just take on fluid all day, every day. It's like being a long distance cyclist, because it is just going to pour out of you. And we take changes of clothes to work, so that you'd have maybe one t-shirt in the morning and one in the afternoon. So the way you keep safe, I guess, because you were saying about sort of safety, there's lots of people who are there to make sure you don't, fall off the edge of the stage. Often the stages are at height, so if you did fall, you would be taking a fall, and you could fall over just in it, on a flat surface. And there's lots of gear in there. There's a monitor in there, and then you have audio equipment, and you're recording stuff because they record your guide track on a radio mic. And I had a radio, like a walkie-talkie, because I was assisting Kevin, assistant puppet captain, so I'd have a walkie-talkie on so I could hear what's happening on second unit. Just loads of stuff. So you stay safe by, I don't know how you stay safe. Making sure you know what your journey is into the room. Don't bump into the furniture. Don't bump into your fellow puppeteers. You plan it all out. Again, it's like the Star Wars thing of Dark Crystal. When you see those scenes, we have looked at it carefully beforehand, and we know where not to step. The Steadicam, Louis Leterrier, who directed, often operated. 90% of it's his operating camera, as well as Eric, who's the director of photography, is operating another camera. So you have to be careful not to bump into them, because Louis would run around you with the Steadicam. There's a very free camera work in Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. He shot puppets differently to Jim and Frank. He shot them like they were actors. So he would run the whole scene. And again, that's something that I'd never done before, where you would walk into the scene and play a 6-minute scene wholesale. And then he'd go, okay, he's French. Okay, well, let's do it again. Everybody reset. And you'd be like, wow, what? We've just done 6 minutes, and everyone's sweating. Get water, get your arm out, have a quick rest. Okay, back in. And then you play that 6-minute scene again, and he'd shoot it from a different angle or whatever. It is physically, without question, the most challenging job I've ever had in my life, for just relentless day after day after day after day after day. And if you got a podling day, you were like, oh, happy days. It's the Muppet Show. We can just mess around with potato face people. They were lovely because they felt so light. They were light as a feather after a Skeksis,
Well, having performed both creatures and sort of Muppet-style puppets, for lack of a better term, do you have a preference for which one to perform?
No, not really. No, I like them all. I think that there's different challenges and different fun to be had with both forms. Light, fluffy, funny, and goofy is I'm a big fan of. Equally heavy, tricky, complex, required days of rehearsal. Monsters and creatures are also fantastic fun, because it's that thing of achieving the goal. So like, make this work. Does this? Why is this not working yet? How do we? It's so much teamwork as well. I love working in teams. So when I go and do, like I'm doing this puppet character right now for the BBC, that's live, goofy, crazy, wacky, and then that's me on my own. So it's all thinking on your feet, and it's all about you just only have yourself to blame if it doesn't work. And then I love working in teams. There's some brilliant puppeteers in the UK, and I've been very lucky enough to work with some of the US performers as well. And that team thing of like, how can we achieve this together? If we do this, if you pull that, when we do that, and we can do that at the same time, and that sort of shooting camera tests where you go from sort of 3 pages on a script, which you just think, I don't know how any of this is possible with it. And then 3 or 4 days later, you are rehearsing those 3 pages and everything is possible, and you figured it out and it looks great. And that sense of achievement is really, really wonderful, And you get to goof around with other people, because a lot of work on your own is great, but like when you get to have fun with other people who are always enthusiastic for the form,
Well, the question I like to ask at the end of every interview is, what has been the highlight of your puppetry career so far?
Oh, that is such a hard question. Do you mean in the work, or what the net result of that was, or do you mean like a moment when?
It's up to you. However you want to interpret it. It can go either way.
Well, I'm gonna say, can I say 2 or not?
Absolutely.
I'm bargaining with you. Okay, I'm gonna say 2, but they're basically the same. It was seeing my name on the credit roller for Muppet Treasure Island, and it was seeing my name on the credit roller for Force Awakens, because there's a weird stitch back through time that hams in your mind where you go, I remember lying in bed thinking, wouldn't it be great, no, when you're going to sleep as a little kid, wouldn't it be great if my name was on the thing and I saw it go up and I did Star Wars or I did Muppets. And so, yeah, both those times. Weird because people don't care about the credits. No one watches the credits. But in your head, you go, that's proof that when I was a little kid, that's what I wanted to do. And then somehow, by hook or by crook, in my crazy little life journey, that's the testament to me. That shows I was there. That's the proof that I did that. So those probably high. And it's weird because there are moments when you're sitting in a preview theater with, bunch of people who made the movie, but you just have that weird moment in your head where you go, yeah, that's great, look at that. And then that the Star Wars one, that kind of blue lettering, weird marine blue Star Wars lettering. I was like, look, it's in blue. It's the same blue as in the old days, And yeah, it's very, that was probably it. And so there's so many. The difficult thing is I'm so privileged to work in a job that I adore and love. And so there's many moments when, you meet people, you interface with people, and you think this is an incredible talent, and they're going to make a great project. And I'm so happy to be, alongside them.
Well, Dave, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to talk to us today on the show.
No problem. It's been an absolute pleasure. You asked really cool questions that I could answer and kind of, talk about the stuff that hopefully if people are listening who want to be puppeteers, who want to get going, just go and do it, because I'm just a nobody from nowhere. But I had a dream and I chased it, and you can do that too. You just have to keep keeping on. That's the important thing. All
right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ron.
Many thanks to Dave Chapman for being on the show. For links to some of the things we talked about, check out the show notes for this episode number 61, over at underthepuppet.com. And if you'd like to hear even more of my talk with David, download the free Under the Puppet app for iOS and Android and click on the gift icon in the listing for this episode. Special thanks to Kevin Clash for helping me connect with Dave. Well, now it's time to announce the winner of episode 60's giveaway for a brand new Fraggle Rock sketchbook. The question was, where was Michelle Zamora's first stop on her world tour after being cast as Waffles? And the answer was Japan. And the winner is Julie Scarborough. Congratulations, Julie, your Fraggle Rock sketchbook is on the way. This episode, we are giving away a brand new copy of the book Puppetry, How to Do It. Written by an experienced theater and puppetry director, Mervyn Millar's Puppetry, How to Do It focuses on the performer and the craft of bringing any puppet to life. No puppet making is required to use this book. Starting with just simple objects, it lays out all the skills required to unlock a puppet's limitless potential for expression and connection with the audience. To be entered to win this copy of Puppetry, How to Do It, simply answer this question from the episode you just heard. Whose resignation caused a quick breakaway moment during one of Otis the Aardvark's daily TV shows? When you find the answer, send it in an email to underthepuppet@gmail.com with the subject line giveaway, and you'll be entered to win. All entries for this giveaway must be received by July 15th, 2021. The winner will be chosen at random from all correct entries and be announced on the August 1st, 2021 episode of the show. One entry per household. Good luck. I want to send a special thank you out to all the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who help make this show possible. Patreon patrons at the producer level and above who get a special shout out are Vicky Sebring, Jamie Dommeyer, David Akers, Tony Urbano, Kathy Crawford, Eve Cunning, and my great aunt, Dorothy Bachoco. To become a patron, visit patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Under the Puppet. If you have questions, suggestions, or feedback about the show, call our voicemail line at 818-806-9604. Or you can click the Call the Show button in the free Under the Puppet app for iOS and Android. You can also send your comments via email to underthepuppet@gmail.com, or you can connect with the show on Instagram or Twitter by searching for Under the Puppet. And don't forget to tell a friend about the show. Thank you so much for listening. This episode of Under the Puppet was edited by Steven Staver and features music by Dan Ring. Under the Puppet is a production of Saturday Morning Media and is made possible by the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons. Become a patron today at patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media. And help spread the word by sharing your favorite Under the Puppet episode with a friend. Under the Puppet is copyright 2021 Saturday Morning Media Grant Bachoco executive producer, all rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com. Under the Puppet proudly presents The Adventures of Timmy the Tooth Reunion. In this almost 90-minute video, you will hear great stories from the cast and crew who brought this amazing puppet show to life. Plus, you'll see never-before-seen artwork and exclusive behind-the-scenes video. Under the Puppets Timmy the Tooth Reunion is available right now at timmy.underthepuppet.com. You've been listening to Saturday Morning Media. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.